COVID-19, we're familiar with the impact, the stay-at-home orders, businesses shut down, and the lack of sports, whether to play or to watch. What's happening in the sports world? Why is everything shut down? And the question all of us have been asking, will they ever come back? Gordon Voigt, the sports director and anchor at WAN TV in Illinois and a Heisman Trophy voter, join us tonight to break down those questions and more. That's all coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm your host, Sam Chen. We continue our conversation tonight on understanding COVID-19. As we all well know, the impact reaches far beyond just the medical circles to small businesses, working Americans around the world, around the country, and also to the playing field. So with sports seemingly indefinitely canceled, all of us are wondering, when will we finally get to see opening day? Gordon Voigt is the sports director at WAN TV in Illinois, a Heisman Trophy voter, and of course, a friend of our show. Gordon, welcome back to Face the Issues in a slightly different setup, but we're glad you're here.
It's amazing how things have changed in just a couple of months, but always glad to be with my buddy Sam Chen, and I got the brand new set here. I had to debut it for you guys.
I love the set. First, how are you doing? With everything has been just chaotic lately. How are you doing with everything?
Well, it's a fascinating time to be a sports anchor right now because, as you've seen on the Tonight Show, on even nightly news, they're all doing it from home. I'm actually still going into the studio for most of my job, obviously practicing social distancing, guidelines there, but it's been totally different. I mean, we're no longer allowed to do in-person interviews, even if there's a 6-foot gap there. So everything's been over Zoom. I've done a bunch of FaceTime interviews, and really, if you can't talk about the present, one thing I love talking about is the past. And so I've been able to celebrate a lot of great history. I did a 75-plus page report called All Time 5, talking about the best players from each community in basketball. And I put those in a tournament. And so now's the time when we're just basically busting out all the stops and covering anything that moves, first of all, and two, just getting creative with historical pieces.
Yeah, I remember seeing your social media posts about the top 5 from all the different communities. Clever, creative. I thought very, very fascinating. Gordon, let's jump into this topic. Obviously, sports are at a standstill right now in America and really around the world. The 2020 Olympics have been canceled, or at least postponed. We all remember there's this viral video of the moment Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, finds out that the NBA season is done. They're in the middle of a game, and he's looking at his phone, and he just has this reaction, and he shows it to the people around him. What was your reaction when you started hearing about these cancellations? First the NBA, then the NCAA March Madness tournament, the NHL, and so forth. What was your reaction?
It was disorienting because it wasn't like all of a sudden, the earth opened up and I fell into a chasm and it was like a big shock. It was kind of like bit by bit. It felt more like, a vertigo type sensation where it's like you're hearing bits of information from over here about the Big Ten tournament, possibly being postponed. And then you hear that it is happening and you say, okay, well, maybe the NCAA tournament can still happen. Oh, wait, no, but then an hour later that changes. And it's just sort of like you didn't know what to believe. You're just sort of reaching for information. I had plans to go to Indianapolis to cover that, and all of a sudden it doesn't happen. And it was just like hour by hour, we were just figuring things out. Like we had plans, to cover things out of state. The NCAA tournament in Illinois was going to hopefully make a big run and possibly be as high as a 6 seed in the tournament. I know Penn State fans, you guys were really looking forward to the first time since 1991. And so there's just a lot of excitement. And then all of a sudden it's just like, it was over. And it was, like I said, it was just a little disorienting for that first week there. Fortunately, I had unintended, contingencies in plan with this all-time 5 project. So we just sort of jumped right into that. But other stations were like, what gives? So
Right.
I feel pretty fortunate.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. You know, the Big 12 tournament was actually about to go underway. All the teams were in Kansas City. They were warming up. When the season goes, Holly Rowe from ESPN tells a story of the Baylor center, Freddie Gillespie, who had that incredible story from a D3 to a walk-on to a scholarship player. And she was with him when the NBA season gets canceled. And he looks at her and says, promise me this can't happen to my senior year. And of course it does. And it's, you know, all these, to your point, the Big Ten tournament, all these teams are there, they're warming up, they're ready to go, and everything just kind of ends. What is that like for you, and what has it been like for you as a sports director? What do you talk about? What you talk about the top 5 project, but what do you cover? What's it been like as a sports director?
We've got a ton of icons here. I'll bring one out right here. So basically, you know, every community's got heroes, and a lot of people are, you know, maybe they don't know the backstory or the connection to the place. So like Andre Iguodala is from our viewing area. He's somebody I've had the fortune to interview. And so, you know, the high school he went to, Lanphier, is an incredibly historic high school. They've had 2 McDonald's All-Americans, multiple NBA players. And so I've done a lot of interviews basically just delving into, you know, what was it like growing up on the north side of Springfield? Who are some of the people that you looked up to? And I've found that everybody's got kind of some common threads, like people they looked up to when they were little kids. And so I love delving into that, and to take, you know, this sort of hard to picture figure, you know, like these people are celebrities right on TV that we see, and to kind of humanize them and show that like they were once the little kid who wasn't picked for the game, you know, when he was growing up, and had his uncle rough him up in the driveway trying to get him tougher. And so I've really just been delving into that. I actually think that I think I'm one of the most unusual people in my job in the industry. And so my experience is not going to be typical. I don't think you hear a lot of people in my position right now saying that they're loving being in this canceled season. Don't get me wrong. Tragedy of the virus. I would not wish this to happen ever again.
Sure.
Because one of my good friends obviously was stricken with the disease. Sam Chen beat it. 1-0 versus Corona. Way to go. Nice job.
I appreciate
Undefeated.
that.
Undefeated. But truthfully, I'm just very much a glass half full guy. And so I always look at positives. And so I just have taken this opportunity when I don't have to do any day-to-day coverage, just do big creative projects. I've just been running with it.
That's awesome. And those in our Philly viewing area are familiar, obviously, with Andre Iguodala and his time with the Sixers.
That's right.
They call him the second AI. Let me ask you, there's a lot of conversation around, you know, when these cancellations are happening. March Madness have thought about playing in empty stadiums, things like that. Viable, not viable? Why? Was this something that was seriously considered, or was it just kind of an attempt to maybe save the season, but we were inevitably going to be where we are now?
I think it ties back into the fact that we had no idea what was happening at the time, and we're just spitballing for ideas. I mean, it's so easy to look back and be like, how could you have thought that would have worked? And it's kind of funny, you know, I scroll through my feed every day, and there's these people with a revisionist history of what was happening. No one knew what was going on. There's literally no precedent for this, at least not in our lifetime. Certainly not with the technology and the society we have now. So to say that somebody was foolish for thinking that this could happen, or that we could play the NCAA tournament in May, possibly, I think we just have to extend some extra grace to people that were making decisions like that, because we had nothing to go off of. And I think that it's interesting when you come up with the idea of socially distanced crowds, which is something that our Illinois athletic director, you know, here in our state, has said maybe we roll out something like that, even if it's not mandated, but just to be safe. You know, do you have a 1/6 full stadium to help kind of distance things out? I don't know. I still think there would be 20,000 people or 10,000 people in one place, and so I think that's a little problematic. But no, to answer your question, the idea of playing in front of empty stadiums, I mean, I could see it happening. But the thing is that as long as the teams themselves are made up of humans who are under the
Hmm.
guidelines, that's still people from all over the country gathering and
Right,
being this far away from each other,
right,
breathing on
right.
each other. So to me, I think it's going to be an all or nothing thing. That's just what I'm predicting. I just don't see, a big topic. I'm sure we'll get to this in a little bit here. Mike Gundy, Oklahoma State football coach, proposed that he basically bring his players back. He says they're strong, they can handle it. We'll quarantine them off. You can't do that because well, for a number of reasons. One of which is that you just put it this way. The athletic director for Illinois said, if it's not safe for the student body and we're not going to bring them back, there's no way we're going to endanger the student athletes. But, it's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see how it's going to play out.
Yeah. Let me ask you along those lines, you talked about Coach Gundy at Oklahoma State and the athletic director at University of Illinois. There is a sense, a lot of seniors, whether in high school, in college, NBA players, NHL players, Major League Baseball players, that you can come back for another season, most generally speaking. But for a lot of these seniors, especially, you think about the winter sports where they haven't been granted these NCAA waivers yet. This is it. This is, you do so well and you work so hard for something and it feels like it's taken from you. How have you spoken to coaches or athletes who've been in that position? How are they taking it? What's kind of the consensus that you get, around that?
As far as seniors who have seen their careers come to an end?
Yeah.
It's devastating. A lot of these kids are going on to Division I schools, the high school level, or possibly if they're in college or going on to the professional level. But for the vast majority of kids, there's nothing after this. They're not going on to the next level. And so that's really, really difficult. And that's been one of the hardest things. And I know parents are frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have families who are moving into a district to play for a certain baseball program, for example.
Yeah.
Jason Worth, national superstar, is actually from Chatham, Illinois, which is just outside of Springfield. So he's a big name that, both of our areas have in common. And, that's a district that people move into to play for the high school program that produced Jason Worth. And now you have in some of these cases, families move and then their kid for that senior season doesn't get a chance to play. And so there's a range of emotions.
Sure.
Track athletes going to, Big Ten universities, talking to them. How do you stay in elite shape by yourself? I mean, there's such a wide range of emotions dealing with this, and it's difficult. I think I don't think it's sunk in quite yet, because here in Illinois especially, they've canceled the state tournaments, but they have not said definitively that there won't be some kind of regular season.
Interesting. Okay.
There's still a tiny bit of hope for some people.
Yeah.
But I think in the next couple of weeks that people realize it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And then, that'll probably hit them like a ton of bricks.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that you brought this. There's a very human element to all of this. We're going to cut the break real quick, but when we come back, I want to keep talking about that human element. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Gordon, thank you again for being here. Let's pick up right where we left off. We're talking about the human element to this, to all these sports cancellations. Obviously, the difficulty on our student athletes, especially those who their seasons or their careers are now over. But there's also a toll on, sports is just so much more than just the coaches and the athletes. And we see these, first of all, with professional athletes, I think a lot of people are aware that, for example, in baseball, minor league baseball players really don't make a lot of money. They're being asked to stay in shape, to condition on something that often equates to less than minimum wage. And then you've got people who work the stadiums. You have your vendors. You have your housekeeping staff. You have and you see people like Mark Cuban saying, we're going to pay our staff with the Mavericks. And Deshaun Watson, the quarterback for the Houston Texans, saying he's going to start paying, from the day one, he's going to pay for the Texans staff. Which are incredible and awesome stories. What is it like for these people, though, with this cancel? This is literally their livelihood. What's that struggle like?
I can only imagine. I mean, I'm usually, a lot of people have these spicy takes about some of the frustrations that folks have with the stay-at-home orders and such. And my reaction to that is you can't react unless you're somebody who's had your livelihood taken away.
Mhm.
Fortunately, thanks to God, I do not have that situation. I have my job. I can only imagine what it'd be like if all of a sudden I was making $0. And so I don't pretend to know what it's like to go through that, let alone to have a family that's depending on you. So fortunately, I'm not in that situation. I do deal with a lot of people in the community who are very frustrated with that, and who do want to see things return to normal. I mean, who doesn't?
Right.
It's just human nature to respond like that. So I try to reserve judgment, just because I'm living such a different situation. Fortunately, things have just kind of been going along as normal, in a lot of ways. So I'm very fortunate about that.
Along those lines, what's the economic impact of this? I mean, obviously for individuals not having paychecks, not having jobs, but remember before you saying that March Madness makes up 80% of the NCAA's operating budget. How does an organization like that recoup, or even an athletic team who's now losing on sales, losing on ticketing, losing on everything that comes with that experience? What is the economic impact, especially as sports come back eventually, hopefully? What do you see that impact being?
It's massive. You hit it on the head there. I mean, I don't think people realize that a huge majority of the NCAA's budget is all from the NCAA tournament, from a series of weekends from one of its sports. And so that got wiped away. And so now they're basically in a budget crisis, and schools individually too, same exact thing. And I've seen a lot of different proposals. Les Miles, the Kansas football coach, is one of many people who said, I'll take a 10% pay cut, trying to basically put a few drops in the bucket there to make up these budget shortfalls. One other possibility is that Division I loosening its regulations. So that right now in order to be in each division, 1, 2, 3, you have to have a certain amount of sports. They do that so that you don't just have like all of your resources into football, et cetera.
Sure.
Also Title IX considerations, et cetera, et cetera. But one proposal that I've seen is to loosen that, to basically say, okay, you can have 12 sports instead of the 18 or whatever the specific number is. And so schools they're doing exactly what any other company would do. And I say that term loosely. They're saying we can't afford to be doing business right now. And so they're dropping employees. And so who are their employees? Their employees are coaches. It's airfare. Their expenses are, airfare, things like that. And so I do not think that I think we've only seen the tip of the iceberg in terms of the financial impact, because these are things that happen on quarterly cycles. And this is something that is only affecting us within the past 3 weeks, basically.
Sure.
But, you've got everything from booster clubs aren't meeting, think about stuff like that. Booster clubs aren't meeting, ticket revenue, but the biggest one, and we'll talk about this in a moment, I suspect, but is the TV revenue.
Yep.
That is what's driving things for professional sports. I'm sure we'll talk later about this, but the biggest thing on the table and the biggest thing they have to lose is the TV revenue. It's not things like selling hot dogs.
Right. Let's actually go there. With TV now, I feel bad for our friends at ESPN, Fox Sports, and so forth, as they're trying to figure out what programming to do. What we're seeing is, they're releasing things like The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. You're seeing some digital sports, so you're seeing a lot of baseball games being simulated. NASCAR is now having drivers drive simulations from their home. A lot of creativity coming out. What is happening in that realm? Is it financially driven by these companies? Is it a sense in which the public is demanding they want to see sports? And what's that impact? I mean, the teams aren't getting revenue, but what's the impact here with the TV networks?
Are you talking about sort of like the NASCAR simulations, or more about Major League Baseball losing revenue?
I mean, I think in general, obviously there are people losing revenue, and then what are stations doing to kind of fill that void, for the void that there are no sports right now?
I think they're basically just trying to run anything they can. I know that the Bulls affiliate here in the Chicago area is running the old '98 playoff run that the Bulls had, from the wild card round on to the finals against the Jazz with that famous shot Michael Jordan hit over Brian Russell. So I think that's one area, but you can't charge a company the same if they're getting maybe 1/10 the viewership,
Right.
that it was going to get. So I imagine that stations local are having to broker make goods agreements, basically saying, okay, so anytime a live event underperforms, this happens at the network level in particular. Say the Super Bowl comes in 2 million viewers short of expectations. Just say for whatever reason, it was a bad matchup or there was something else really big going on that day. Then what happens is the networks, they promise a certain level of viewership. And if it comes under that, then they have to do what's called make goods, which is give them extra advertising, give them a refund, something like that to help make up for that loss. And so I think that local affiliates, Pennsylvania, Illinois right now are trying to figure that out. And I think a lot of them are trying to get as creative as possible by doing things like airing old games. And you know what? We see that in Hollywood too. It's like nostalgia is very, very powerful right now.
Right.
There's anxiety in the present. There's anxiety in the future. There's no anxiety in the past.
Right. Right.
And so we've seen a remake of Jumanji, 3 times? That movie came out like 10 years ago.
That's right.
It was still in some theaters, and they had the remake already lapping it in the same theater.
Oh my goodness. I'm not convinced that 2020 is not happening because of a remake of Jumanji, but let me ask
That's a good point.
Let me ask you, Gordon, with these reruns of the Bulls Championships series, the Bulls aren't getting revenue off of that though, right? So it's just the station.
Good question. I actually don't know that.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer. I do know though that pressure of losing the live TV revenue is absolutely what is driving things right now with the recent proposal to play all games in the NBA at the Disney complex in Florida. So that's something I'm sure you want to get to eventually, but
yeah,
TV is absolutely the fire that is lit underneath people's feet, driving them to propose things like Major League Baseball playing only in spring training venues, etc.
Yeah. Well, let's go real quick with about a minute here. What do you think sports comes back, and is it coming back in a revised form like the playing in Disney or the Arizona League for baseball?
4 different leagues, 4 different answers to that question. Major League Baseball just canceled. I don't know if you saw this, just canceled the Hall of Fame ceremony in Cooperstown, New York in July.
Okay. Wow.
And so to me, that's a canary that I think we should be paying attention to. And so that tells me that there's probably not going to be any live events until July at the earliest. But I bet some people say that's a sign that they're not going to play, period. I think there's too much money on the table for them to not play some games as soon as it's possible, and maybe even just go into the winter and play in Arizona and Florida where you can play in December. But I think that the decision is very real, and I know we're running out of time here, but it's do you want some money or no money? And I think the answer will be some money.
So they're going to do what they can to get a season somewhere going.
Yeah, even if that means playing in December, January, February, March. I think they would do that.
And I think the fans would be grateful. So thank you, Gordon. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Gordon, thank you again for joining us. I I feel like every episode we could talk for 6 or 7 of these episodes about these topics. But I appreciate you joining us. I appreciate what you do. Let me close with this question. I really just want to kind of give you a blank slate. We got about 2 minutes here. You cover so many colleges and student athletes. And what I love about what you do is you love telling their stories. So many with their canceled seasons, especially our seniors who are now graduating, their seasons are canceled, their commencement is canceled, a lot of uncertainty. What message would you give to them about looking to that future and what they can expect?
My message to them is that they should use this. Make this a part of your story. Leverage it for character instead of letting it send you into the gutter. Because you have 2 options right now, and it's awful for everybody. Nobody is happy right now about what's going on. But you have an opportunity to rise above this. Make this part of your story. Whether it's taking away your final season. I mean, it's really no different. I think this is one way I would phrase it. This is no different than the entire country getting a torn knee that knocks out a season. when we see people like, Inky Johnson, the motivational speaker who's without one of his arms, the use of one of his arms, and he uses that to help other people. So my question to them is, how can they use this as an opportunity to serve other people around them, serve the people that come after them, telling kids about what it's like to deal with adversity? Because the reason that sports is important in our society is that it's a simulation for life. It teaches us how to handle conflict. So you have an opportunity right now. This is a test for you. This is going to happen to you later in life with your spouse, with your kids, with your job. And you have an opportunity right now to show that you are tough enough to handle this kind of adversity. And I'm just really excited to see how people will use this as a way of adding character instead of letting it unravel them.
Yeah. Thank you, Gordon. That's such great advice. God doesn't waste the details of our lives. We shouldn't either. Excellent advice. Gordon, thank you for joining us. As always, appreciate what you do. Stay safe.
Thanks, Sam. I appreciate it. You're the real hero. Again, 1-0 against the Corona, undefeated.
I appreciate that, Gordon. That is all the time we have tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. Continue this conversation with us online. Just remember to use the hashtag #FaceTheIssues. My name is Sam Chan. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.